How are you developers? I hope you are doing well today. In our journey through the world of web development, today's class holds a key to unlocking the visual allure of our creations. We'll be delving into the realm of CSS selectors, those powerful tools that allow us to breathe life and style into our HTML documents. So, buckle up and get ready to explore the intricacies of selectors as we uncover the secrets to crafting captivating web designs. If you have been following the course, you are familiar with the repository we forked, which holds the crucial resources that we'll use in this course. To access today's notes, log in into your GitHub account, navigate to the repository you forked. If you are behind, click the Sync Fork button, then click on the Update branch to ensure that your branch is up to date. Then open your favorite editor, mine is Visual Studio Code, and locate your cloned repository. Then use the git pull command to fetch the changes to your local machine. This process guarantees you to have the most recent notes. So if you open your Visual Studio Code and pull the changes, you see that there are two folders. We are currently dealing with the CSS folder, and today's class is class 2 of learning CSS. You can see there 02 selectors. Inside the selectors, you can see there is one readme file which contains the resources that we'll use for this course. So I'll just create another file here called index.html, and also I'll insert my boilerplate there. Then I'll rename the title to selectors, because that's what we're learning today. Also, I'll add the link here, the link to my CSS style sheet. We've already talked about that in yesterday's class. So I'll create the file style.css like that. So this name should match the name that is here in the link. So I think now I'm set to learn about selectors. I'll just open my notes using the previewer like that, and I'll expand my screen like that. So I'll have the HTML file here, the CSS file here, and my notes on the right. So without much ado, let's dive into learning CSS selectors. As we said in the introduction, selectors in CSS are used to target and style HTML elements based on different criteria. And today we look at some of the criteria that are used to style HTML elements. So you can see that there are a lot of criteria, but we'll look at the first criteria that we'll look at is the element selectors. Just a recap, we said CSS syntax includes a selector like that. This is the syntax of CSS. Then here you write your property. Then you write your value. Then this line is called a declaration. So if you have more than one declarations, you separate them with the semicolon. So if I want to put another declaration, I can just put another declaration like that. So here is the selector. This is what we're talking about today. Then this one's property will be CSS properties, and they'll have different values. And this is the syntax of writing CSS. So today we look at different selectors. These selectors, they are different types. So today we look at some of the selectors, some types of selectors. And I've said the first selector that we look at is the element selector. So let's start looking at the element selector. The first selector that we're going to talk about is the element selector. And as you can see in the notes that the element selector selects HTML elements based on the element name. And there's an example here, but let us see it in action. So I'll just create a paragraph and I'll paste some text I copied online. This is the lorem ipsum text. You can just copy this also. You can reduce the paragraph to be a little bit short. Create the paragraph element and paste it there. So yeah, here I have two paragraph elements, and each paragraph has a has some content. So for me to style this content, I can use the element selector to style the content. So I can come here to CSS and use the element selector. So I've said the element selector selects elements based on their name. So this element is a paragraph. So the name is P or paragraph. So I'll just select like that. Or this here is just the tag name. You put the tag name there. Then as you say the syntax, you put the selector. Then this curly braces. Then inside the curly braces, you put a property and a value. So I'll just use the one here in the notes. I'll just say color red. And also text align center. Like that. So here we have selected the paragraph. So all paragraphs in our document, there are 2 paragraphs here. All of them will have these styles because we selected the element name. So let us go to the browser and see how this is in action. If you go to the browser, you can see all our 2 paragraphs. This was the first paragraph, and this one was the second paragraph. You can see all of them have the red color, and also they are aligned at the center. You can see this line here. There's some space this side and this side. So the text is aligned at the middle. That means you have styled the HTML document using the element selector, and that is how you use the element selector. So let us look at the next selector. The next selector that we'll talk about is the ID selector. The ID selector uses the ID attribute of an HTML element to select a specific element. And when we're learning about CSS, we say that the ID element should be unique within a page. So the ID selector is used to select only one unique element. And to select an element with a specific ID, use the hash character. We saw that when you're learning about IDs in HTML, but we'll just recap. And also say that ID name cannot start with a number. And also the same ID name can only be shared with one element. 2 elements cannot have the same ID name. So I'll just create this time I'll use the header tag. This header tag here. Then inside the header, I think we learned these things in HTML, so I'll not explain too much. Inside the header, I'll put my h1 there. So I'll just put h1 and say CSS Selectors. Like that. Also inside the header, I'll put a nav bar. A nav. Inside the header, I'll also put a nav like that. All these are just HTML elements. Inside the nav, I'll just put some links like that. 4 links. And the links, this will be the home link. This one will be the about link. This one will be the services link. This one will be the contact link. Currently we don't have these things, but I'll just mimic how the web is. So I'll just write although they don't exist, this one home usually it's just like that, an empty tag. This one mostly you have a separate about page. Services also have a different service page, and contact also have a contact. This is just an example of a nav bar, of how you will build a nav bar. So using the ID attribute, I can style this header by assigning this header an ID, like that. ID. I'll give the ID name to be just header. So this is a container which has an ID of header. This header is just a container that has an ID of header. So if I want to style this header, I can go to my CSS styles here, and you've said that to select an ID, use the hash symbol, then the ID name, like that. So I'll say hash header. because this header was my ID name here. Then as usual, I just put the curly braces. Then inside there, I can put my style. So I'll just put the background color to be Larrywood. Or is it that one? Then the text color, the color should be white. Just that. So let us save and go to the browser and see how this is. So if you go to the browser, you notice that I have my header here, and my header has this h1 saying CSS Selectors. Then here there are some links, although they're not working because you don't have the pages, but you can see I've applied the color and the background color of the header. And that is how you use an ID to style your HTML elements. So let us look at the next selector. The next selector is the class selector. And the class selector targets HTML elements based on their class attributes. So you can add a class attribute in HTML elements and provide the class name. So let us see how this is in action. For example, I want to style these nav links that I've created here. These links, I can add here the class, and I say the class is nav link, like that. Then I can save. So if I want to style this link, I can go to CSS, and you have said here that to select an element with a specific class, you use a period or a dot. This symbol here, use that. So I can say dot nav link, and also I give them the color of white. There's this thing called text decoration. You'll see how this works. I can say text decoration none. This is used to remove the underline in the links. So if I save, and let me go to the browser. So if I go to the browser, you can see that the first link, the color is white and it does not have this underline. So I changed the color and I changed the text decoration. Text decoration, I put it to none to remove this underline. You can see these other links are blue and they have an underline, and they're underlined. So if I want to remove this underline, I can just say text decoration none to remove the underline. So that is how you use the class selector. Also, if I want all the links to have this same styles here, you can notice that we style only one link, the home link only. So if I wanted all the other links to have the same style, I can just add the class. I can add this class here to all my links, like that. And once I add the class to all my links, you'll notice that all my links will now have a color of white and they'll not be underlined. So I can go to the browser and confirm that. You can see all my links are now white in color and they don't have the underline, because I put the class, the nav link class, to all the anchor elements that I had in my page. Initially, I had put the class only in the home link only, but now we have put the same class in all the links. Now all my links have a color of white and they are not underlined, because we use the text decoration property to remove the underline. And that is how you can apply the same class to multiple elements. So if you apply the same class to multiple elements, all the elements will have the styles that you described for that class. Also, unlike IDs, you can apply more than one class to an element. For example, this element here, the home element, has this class called navlink. I can just put a space here and add another class. Let's say this class is called large. So you can see my home link now has two classes, and I can also style this class using the dot syntax that we talked about. So I can say large, then set the font size to be, let's say, 30 pixels. So now our home link has two classes. The first class is to make the color to be white and to remove the underline. And the next class, called large, is to make the font size of that home link to be huge. This is just an example to show you that you can use more than one class more than one class name in the same element. So you can go to the browser and see how that looks like. So if you go to the browser, you can notice that our home link now is 30 pixels. So it's huge than the other links. And it also has the previous styles that it had, the style for color and the style for text decoration. It still maintained the previous class, and additionally it had an extra class that added some styles for the font size. So our home link is styled using two classes, and that is how you can combine more than one class in a single element. I've said that for you to use more than one class in a single element, you can separate the class names using spaces. And also, you have seen that you can separate the class name using spaces. That means that your class name should not have a space, because if your class name has a space, the HTML can interpret those as two different classes. So your class name should be just one word. If there are two words, you can separate them using a dash. You have seen how I separated mine, the nav link. I said nav, then dash link. If your class name has two words, you can separate them using a dash. And also, just like the ID, the class name cannot start with a number. So that is it with classes. Let us look at the next selector. The next selector is the universal selector. And as you can see in the notes, that the universal selector selects all elements in your HTML page. So if you want all these elements here to have the same styles, all of them, you can use the universal selector. And the universal selector is denoted by an asterisk or a hash or a star, like that. So this is the selector. This asterisk here is the selector, indicating the universal selector. For example, if I want all my elements to have a color of white, I can just select all elements, then say the color white. Also, I'll remove this color declarations on the elements so that they don't conflict. I'll just save. You can see I put all my elements to have a color of white. So let's just put a different color, say like blue, because the background color by default is white, so you might not see the text. So let's put a color like blue so that you can see the text. So if I want all my elements to have a blue color, I'll just use the universal selector, like I've said it's the star, then put your declaration there. I've put the color to be blue. So let me save this code and go to the browser and see if that is the case. So you can see in the browser that all our elements now have a color of blue, and we styled all of them using the universal selector, that is the star or the asterisk. I didn't want to put a color of white because by default our background color is white. If I had selected the color to be white, this text here could not be visible, because you can see the background color is white, and also if the text could be white, it could not be visible. That's why I selected a color like blue for it to be visible. So that is how you use the universal selector. So now let us look at another selector. The next selector is the grouping selector. So this grouping selector selects all HTML elements within the same style definition. And for you to group selectors, for you to use this grouping selectors, you just use the normal selectors that I've discussed, but just separate them with a comma. So for example, if I wanted to group the selectors, I can just group this paragraph like that, the element selector, then maybe I can use the nav selector like that, the class selector, then also the ID selector. If I use more than one selector and separate them with a comma, this is what we say is called grouping. So, and this is the grouping selector. Grouping selector selects more than one selector and separates them with a comma. So if I apply a style here, the style will be applied to all these selectors. So I can just say a font weight bold. If I save, the paragraph will have a font weight of bold, the header will have a font weight of bold, and also the nav link will have a font weight of bold. So let me save this and go to the browser and see how it looks like. So if you go to the browser, you notice that both the paragraph, this class, and the header, all of them have a bold font weight. And that is how you use the grouping selector. You just use the normal selectors, but you can just combine the selectors, and that is why it is called grouping. And that is it about selectors today. We'll learn about selectors in another class, maybe next week. But for today, that was enough for selectors. See you in tomorrow's class where we'll learn about the CSS box. So peace out.